about putting in litter boxes. So hey, here we go, live and in person. We're already fighting the misinformation campaign. We have started the recording. So, hey, ladies and gentlemen, my name is again Devin Moore. My friends just call me Moore. Welcome to, hopefully, will be one of many conversations in the fireside chat. I have with me a good friend, goes by the name of Cole. Cole, please introduce yourself.
Well, I'm Moore's good friend Cole. I'm about in my early 20s from the state of Michigan. Used to be a former card-carrying proud Republican, and through recent years, I've been led astray, as the Republicans would say, but found new light in the Libertarian Party, trying to find myself, be more proud of my American politics and trying to get local.
So Cole is actually a well-read, educated son of a gun. Although I have a hatred towards libertarians, which I've explained to him several times. We're working on that. We're working on that. Mm. You know,
Nothing wrong with picking the happy medium.
not everybody can be perfect like myself, so we gotta start where we can. So Cole, obviously we've talked several times, and the point of this is to try to get as some of our conversations that I feel have been very productive on an actual recorded format. So first and foremost,
Right.
let's get the elephant out of the room. Who did you vote for in the 2024 election?
So I used to pride myself on researching politics. I heavily researched the last election in 2020 and voted Libertarian. And 2016 election, I was not eligible to vote for due to my age. But I kept up with politics in both of those major presidential campaigns. But this past year, being exhausted from 2020 and the events after 2020, the pandemic, all of the political uproar and turmoil, I stayed away from politics and just went back to my roots and voted for good old DJT, which, looking in hindsight now, instantly regretting.
So, I, obviously, I don't hate you for voting for Donald Trump. I can't hate a lot of Americans. I hate the misinformation and ignorance that didn't lead to folks voting for him. But we're working on that. Working on that. One small YouTube video at a time. One thing I wanted to
A
ask, and
people in my demographic.
yeah, yes, exactly, my demographic as well, unfortunately. For context, I am about 27 years of age. Cole here is only 21, so he is that prime demographic of folks that Donald Trump went heavily towards this election. He got about 80% of the first time voters, and so that's what we're trying to address here. So Cole, one thing you mentioned that you brought up before that I wanted to hit on is that one of the reasons you voted this election the way you did was just you were kind of exhausted. Can you describe a little bit more
Yes.
kind of how you were feeling on that?
So being so well versed and spending so much time, because I took many political science classes and basic social studies classes throughout middle school and throughout high school in my local area. Um, I studied so much into the politics and how lobbyists and how campaigns are run and how people push out hate media and support media. So I just kept trying to digest all the information that both candidates were putting out in both 2016 with Hillary and Donald, and then with Joe and Donald in 2020, and just seeing every little ounce. And coming from a libertarian perspective, you're getting both sides of that spectrum because they don't want you to vote libertarian because being that our country is very bipartisan, we don't really support any third or fourth parties. It's coming down between two. So you're trying to pick the lesser of two evils, is what libertarians mostly say when they try to vote either one of the big two major parties. And so you're digesting all this information, you're digesting all this hate speech, and it takes a toll. I mean, I walked out of the 2020 election just dog tired. Didn't I didn't want to care for 2024 because I didn't think anything was going to happen. Now, hindsight, lots of changes are coming, and now we're just gonna have to deal with the brunt of it and do what we can to survive.
Yeah, that survival part is what I think a lot of folks are nervous about. So since you said you were libertarian, you've supported and actually donated money to RFK's campaign. Is that correct?
Yes, I have.
Yeah. So how did you feel when RFK dropped out of the race and endorsed Donald Trump? Did that change your opinion on the election as a whole? Did you view RFK less favorably? Did you view Donald Trump more favorably after that?
So I viewed Trump more favorably because seeing that I really supported Kennedy. I
Hmm.
really believed in a lot of his policies. I believed in what he was saying. And I was really wanting a change in our political spectrum from just Democrats and Republicans to finally bringing in that third party that we haven't had for years. I think one of the last historic independent presidents that we had was Teddy Roosevelt, who was part of the Moose Party.
What he actually, so Teddy Roosevelt, when he was president, ran as a Republican, but he never actually managed to.
Right.
Yeah, I think
He
his.
never won
Yeah,
as the Moose Party, but he had he had quite a following.
he did, yes. But one would argue is that the Moose Party technically swung the election towards Wilson, who was not the
Right. Yeah.
best of presidents. So it's a good example I think you bring up. It also kind of shows the inherent problem with some third party avenues that is unfortunate in the U.S. So good, but funny you bring that one up. Big fan of Teddy Roosevelt. Um, all right, so you mentioned feeling exhausted. You mentioned that you have a bit more libertarian leaning. What did you like that Donald Trump brought to the table after RFK endorsed him? Did you like that he was basically making RFK a cabinet position or promised him that?
I liked seeing RFK finally, but it wasn't the sense of him getting validation. It was more of a, all right, well, if Trump's going to have him a part of his administration, I don't think this entire administration is going to be all corrupt. I'll see there's at least one guy in there that I have some amount of faith in,
Yeah. Well,
and then
I'm curious
I see
on that.
others put in the cabinet.
Yeah, that was yeah that the some of his cabinet picks definitely weren't campaigning with him for I think a reason. I'm curious on that because when I saw RFK kind of switch to Donald Trump's side, I saw that more as a quid pro quo, like as in itself an inherently corrupt act because RFK never had a chance. He realistically was never going to get 10% or 15% in order to get on the debate stages. So I'm curious as to when you saw him go and endorse Donald Trump for the promise of eventually a government position, did you not see that as inherently a corrupt action or
No, I didn't see it as a corrupt action. I just saw it as, all right, well, if I'm not going to be able to run, I might as well side with one of the two candidates. That way I can make some change on a smaller level and or possibly run again to promote myself
yeah.
once more.
That's okay. I guess I can see that. So I'm curious on this because we haven't talked about this particular thing. Do you know that most presidents throughout at least modern history have tried to, in their cabinets and administrations, have at least one person of the opposite party? Uh, like,
Yeah,
okay.
yeah, I've seen that before.
Did you know that Donald Trump has never done that? He never did
Oh
that.
no, I noticed that with his last term.
Yeah.
I saw
Um,
that.
some would argue is that technically now he's going to have Democrats as part of his administration, RFK and Tulsi Gabbard, both of whom,
You could argue that
yeah, I wouldn't, but some would argue that. Um,
someone,
but let's go ahead.
probably a majority of the Republican supporters would argue that just to defend themselves.
So I know we've obviously talked previously about this, and I'd go over it again because anybody watching this for the first time, I want to make sure that they have the full context and information. You said because I actually talked to you before the election happened, and you said you were kind of like questioning your vote or thinking against it then because
Yeah.
you voted
Yep.
early. So what exactly did I say that made you kind of think twice about it?
So I remember you and I had many conversations prior to my early casting on the vote, and then after I voted. Um, you had me realize that I wasn't as red bleeding as I thought, as I had once hoped. You brought a lot of policies and conversations that had me thinking, well, I don't really think I am what I say I am. I don't think I'm just pretending at this point to fit with a common majority.
Well, it's
But no, after after that vote went in, I sat there and saw the results roll in. I thought I was happy with my results, and I started seeing the aftermath.
Yeah. One thing you mentioned before that I kind of like stuck with me is that you weren't particularly worried until you saw Democrats losing the House. What describe to me your
Yes.
feelings about that, if you could provide more information.
So, one of the biggest things that a lot of moderate conservatives, libertarians aren't realizing is that if Republicans take the House and the Senate, there are two forms of checks and balances right there within the legislative and the executive branch that are now able to pass damn near anything they would like through without much backlash. I mean, obviously there's going to have to be a vote in both chambers in order to get it pushed through. But seeing that most of Congress is red, along with the White House, what's going to be there to stop them? And most of the Supreme Court justices in the judiciary branch are also appointed by Trump. And
Yeah.
most of the Democratic Supreme Court justices may step down due to the ongoing turmoil that's already coming.
You think the current Supreme Court justices that are more liberal or left leaning are going to step down?
That's been kind of something I've been hearing, like rumors that's been muttered around. I don't think personally it'll happen because I hope to see them stay in. However, seeing that their age, like justices aren't exactly youthful,
No.
as some people have seen,
Although
and I
Trump,
can see them just getting tired and wanting to step away.
yeah, Trump has specifically gone after younger conservatives to be justices for just that reason, because that way they'll stay in longer. To
Right.
help alleviate some of your
Yep.
concern on that, because that's obviously something that I'd be terrified of too. Recently, Republicans have been a little annoyed is that certain Democratic appointed justices, not on the Supreme Court level, but on lower levels, they have said that they will cancel their retirement in light of Donald Trump's election. So luckily, some of the
That
judiciary is going to
that
help
makes me
protect
feel a
us.
lot better.
Yeah. The unfortunate thing about that, and this is something I always try to reiterate, since Obama, Republicans have specifically been trying to flood the entire judiciary with conservative appointed justices. Obviously, the most famous of those cases were the Supreme Court justice that they did not appoint at the last year of Obama's presidency. And then when they set that standard, that as the precedent going forward, Republicans then shoved in another Supreme Court justice in like the last month of Trump's presidency. So
Yep.
imagine that on a much larger scale for the entire judiciary. That is it's something that I've been advocating or at least acknowledging and trying to like scream against for a while. So how do you feel about that? Do you think that's a both sides issues in regards to stacking the judiciary, or do you think that Republicans have been? I'm not trying to like lead you on the question. Obviously, I have a point of view on it. So
No.
what do you think about that?
I do believe that it's been more of a Republican standpoint, especially when Trump was in office. I mean, I remember the whole Brett Kavanaugh trials, Trump putting Kavanaugh on the Supreme Court justice line, and I remember seeing the trials going on with that. And before then, you hardly ever heard of any justice having backlash being appointed.
Hmm.
So just through recency, I'd say that it's been more of a Trump and Republican standpoint. But one thing I'd like to bring up is not all Republicans are in support of Trump. I know a majority of them are, but like it's a whole different GOP now.
Yeah. I want to address two things
Completely
you
different.
said. One is you mentioned that you don't actually see a lot of backlash against justice appointments, or at least in recent memory. One of the current Supreme Court justices, one of the most controversial, Thomas, he actually had a very similar appointment when he was nominated. He was accused of inappropriate communications. I don't believe he was ever accused of rape, but he was accused of like sexual misconduct towards his subordinates during his
Yeah.
appointment. That one was a very
Okay.
controversial, very similar to Kavanaugh, also under a Republican administration, coincidentally enough. But it's been if you look and study the history of these parties over the last 100 years, you can see reoccurring patterns occur.
I gotcha. Okay.
So on the fact that you said that most or some Republicans don't support Donald Trump, I would. This is something that I need to be convinced of because I have seen and I don't want to say make friends, but I have seen and followed the Republicans that don't support Donald Trump. Do you know any off the top of your head that I may not be aware of?
Any like public officials? No,
Okay.
I can't name any off the top of my head.
All right. So the rank and file voters, right? There may be Republicans who don't
Yeah.
support him on certain things, but I think like yourself, part of the frustration with that is people say that, but then they still go vote for him, right? That's kind of like
Right.
okay, well, you don't supported him, but you gave him the office, you didn't provide any checks, you obviously supported him enough that you were okay with that. That's where I get
I believe
frustrated.
it's one of those. I believe it was one of those. Well, he's Republican. Yeah, I don't agree with everything he says, but
Yeah.
well, I'll be damned to vote Democrat. Probably one of those instances.
That I get a lot, and I think that you think that maybe influenced your vote when you voted this election.
I would say so, but like I said, one of the main reasons that I voted for Trump in the end was having hope in Kennedy, but seeing how he's just kind of running along with Trump and his agenda, I'm sitting here thinking, what did I pay 5 months for the past 5 months, or $5 for the last 5 months for a total of $25? Could have got me a pack of beer, but instead I was supporting a guy that just ended up quitting in the end.
Yeah. If it makes you feel any better, I gave hundreds of dollars towards the Democratic candidates. Not all of them won, obviously. So I'm right there with you. I could have done a lot with that money. Um, I don't regret it,
Yeah,
but I'd obviously kind of like, that was a bad investment. So the other thing I wanted to ask, so obviously you can't think of any public officials. I actually know several public officials that have come out against Trump, and the thing that concerns me the most is those public officials are no longer in office or holding any type of actual positional authority.
right.
Mitt Romney is one of the more
Yep.
famous ones, and while I don't agree with nearly any of Mitt Romney's politics, he's retiring from the Senate. So I kind of the Republicans that stayed. I mean, Cheney is the most prime example. I'm sure you saw what happened to her.
Yep.
Yeah, Cheney voted against, did not vote against Trump's politics almost at all. Voted very much in line with policies, but when it came down to it of putting like the country first at his second impeachment, she chose to vote in favor of it, and that's what lost her the party line. So it's always like
Yep.
a lot of times we describe the far right and the far left as equally bad, but the far right seems to be winning the party. The far right seems to be getting more and more of their radical candidates to run for office and eliminating that supposed middle ground of republicanism. So, like, I hear people say
Right.
that, I don't believe it. You know what I mean?
And I can understand that. I can understand the disbelief with it because yeah, it we've talked about this before. Trump has said himself, if you do not agree with me, you're an enemy of the state. So, you know,
Yeah.
it's kind of scary. It's kind of tyrannical of him to just come out and willingly say that, and doesn't make people want to question his authority because, well, I don't want to be deemed an enemy of the state and face repercussions. So that's why I feel like moderate conservatism is just going in favor of him instead of being labeled a domestic terrorist.
Did you see, you mentioned domestic terrorists. Did you see at, I believe, the 2022 Republican convention, they had an entire segment where they said that we are all domestic terrorists?
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. I mean, that kind of goes along with him wanting to pardon the January 6th rioters, like QAnon and all of them.
Yeah. Yeah. It's, oh, God. Uh, I'm trying to keep this as a focused conversation because believe me, there's a lot of rabbit holes I can go down on that. As you know, so Cole and or excuse me, yeah, Cole and I don't know why I forgot your name for a second. Cole and I are coworkers, and obviously I have a reputation at work for going on very long rants. I like to say it as lectures, but rants, and
Yeah,
which is the reason I'm
yep,
starting to do this. I think they've been productive lectures, right?
I would say so.
Okay,
Absolutely.
thank
I
you.
mean, it's opened my eyes to many different things.
I needed that reassurance that I wasn't just a crazy person. It's like that Always Sunny meme
Seeking the
where
validation, I get it.
Always Sunny meme where he's like by the poster board going crazy, like this is
You're
it.
pointing at everything.
Yeah, that's been me to a T.
Yep.
So one thing I wanted to ask, obviously, you said you grew up, or at least majority of your political opinion has been kind of shaped by libertarianism. Could you speak on that story you mentioned to me about when you wore a Betsy Ross shirt to school one time?
So, one of the things I love to say when it comes to people asking me about my politics, I am a libertarian at heart. Um, However, I like to just say, well, this whole story comes from many different rabbit holes I could go down. I'll just share one. I shared to my freshman government class that I was libertarian, and many of the richer, younger conservatives in that class called me liberal. Oh, you're a libtard. You're this. You're that. I'm like, the hell does that mean? Libertarianism and liberalism are two completely different things. So I just like to say that I'm a proud American and I am a patriot to my country. So that being said, I wear brands like Buckwear, Grunt Style, Nine Line, all these pro patriot companies, and I was wearing a Buckwear Betsy Ross flag shirt. On the front of it, it had the 13 stars. On the top right of the shirt, and then on the sleeve it had Betsy Ross flag in all white, and then on the back had a distressed full color Betsy Ross flag. And I was wearing it in my high school, and I get cornered in a hallway by what conservatives would say is like the generic blue-haired liberals.
The libtard, yeah.
Yes. So I get cornered by them, and I'm labeled a racist. I'm labeled a domestic terrorist. I'm labeled one of the Proud Boys, which at that time I had no earthly idea who the hell they were.
Real quick, because
And when I did my research,
you say freshman year, that's a lot longer for me, unfortunately. What year was this?
around, let's see, I graduated 22. So
God, I feel so old.
about 2 years after, 2 years or 3 years after the 2016 elections.
Okay, that makes sense. That makes sense why that was in the cultural zeitgeist.
Yeah. So I'm deemed one of the Proud Boys, to which I had no idea who the hell they were. And I did my research and was very upset that I was labeled one of them.
Yeah.
And it made me confused because I'm wearing a shirt that brings pride, or that's a historical flag to me, that's American pride.
Yeah.
And they said that I support slavery and I'm a racist. And I quickly informed them, I'm like, this flag quickly and throughout history turned into the flag that freed the slaves.
Not a wrong take on that. I do appreciate that take. So one of the things when we talked about this before that I asked you is like, because I don't agree with the stereotypical liberal response to some of those flags, and I think a lot of the
Right.
issues that we have is that some of these folks control the narrative. But I'm curious, do you associate like that interaction with the entirety of the left or the entirety of the Democratic Party?
No, because I before then I have met many well-educated, well-respected Democrats as colleagues and classmates that I had at that time.
Mhm. All right, so we're back from our quick coffee break. Cole, just to let you know, we are recording again. So don't mention any
Fantastic.
beer names because I don't want to put out free advertising without getting compensated.
I'll just say I'm having a generic ale.
There you go. So the thing you were just mentioning in regards to considering like all leftists or liberals in this one monolith, that is something that I've personally been on the receiving end from, right? Like obviously I'm a bit of an
Right.
accent and I have a bit of a cultural history growing up, but I always consider myself as educated as possible, and I do think that you should always be in pursuit of better educating yourself, which is why for some reason
Absolutely.
it's been very fun interacting with some of you younger guys at work because I get a lot of assumptions about certain political standings and whatnot, and So they'll start asking me questions and everything. And I think we need to get away from pointing everybody left of center as that crazy libertarian, or not libertarian,
Yep.
excuse me, libtard sort of mentality. Um, be
Yep.
honest with you,
I 100% agree with that.
I'll be honest with you. I think it painting everybody on the left, especially as that generic thing, has been the worst aspect, because if you look at the politics of the party, Kamala Harris was a moderate by every respect, as was Joe
Yeah.
Biden and Hillary
By
Clinton.
every means.
Yeah. Donald Trump is not a moderate in any
No.
respects, especially
No.
nowadays. He kind of ran on that moderate, and I've seen a lot of people who, like more gayer folks who voted for Trump lean on that side, is that he was socially much more liberal than previous Republicans. But Kamala Harris got pointed as a communist, comrade, defund the police person, even though she never said anything like that. And I think,
And I'd say that comes back to all the extremism, where you said that Kamala was a very moderate candidate for the Democratic Party, one that wasn't like Biden, that wasn't like previous other Democratic candidates.
oh no, she was very much, in
Where
regards to
Trump,
politics, she was very moderate with Biden, I should say. Biden was also very
right?
moderate. Do you think Biden was moderate, or?
I'd say that whole 2020 election just had way too much writing on it.
Mhm.
I mean, there's so much turmoil. Like, Trump, to me, Trump has been an extremist in every sense for the Republican Party. And to have the GOP bounce back from that, it's going to take a long time.
I don't
Because
think
one
so.
of the things I'm saying now is people are like, oh, well, thank God can't, or Trump can't win again. And I'm like, well, no, he can't, but Vance can sure as hell try.
Yeah. Oh God, yeah. And you have some folks concerned that Trump won't just go quietly, won't just like give up. He's made a lot of comments in regards
Nope.
to, yeah. That's the concern again. Like, I've had a lot of people ask me if I would vote for a Republican candidate depending on whoever the Democrat it was, and I always respond with like, yes, absolutely. If anybody had, because I
Yeah.
first election I voted in was 2016. If anybody had run against Hillary Clinton, I probably would have been more inclined to vote for them. Mitt Romney I'd have voted for. I would have never voted for him after that, because Hillary Clinton was a uniquely
Right.
polarizing candidate. Even though I don't agree, not particularly the important topic right now. But because Donald Trump was just, and I think a lot of people ignore the fact that he is uniquely terrifying in both his ineptitude and competence and the natural ability he wants to do, that goes in line with what dictators have done all around the world.
And then into segue into one of our next points of conversation that we
Mhm.
were going to bring up before. Um, my small sliver of Northwest Ohio, that little Toledo strip, known in history.
Oh yeah.
Um, we're, I mean, I was wedged in between two cities. Toledo was not as major as a city in Ohio. I'd say like the big three are Cleveland, Columbus, and Cincinnati. Toledo's just kind of there, and Detroit. And I was wedged in the middle of them. So I like to say that I was like the urban farm boy of Northwest Ohio, because I went out and I worked with migrants, farmers in the land,
Mhm.
and I'd go to like tractor pulls, combine derbies, and everything on the weekends, and I'd also go to the city for races. So being in those two political spheres where you have a more Republican, conservative based farmland and then the Democratic cities, it's insane to see. So coming from those two mediums, seeing people root for Trump and just become humongous Trump supporters. Like there was a house, like a little roadside house on I-75 going north to Detroit, that every square inch on the outside of that house had Trump 2020, MAGA, Trump 2016, Trump 2024. Like they're already putting out so much stuff, and they had um, "Let's Go Brandon" or flags. If you ever remember that
Oh, I believe
whole
me. Well versed on that, buddy.
motto, yeah, yeah.
That's
So it was just covered.
One thing you mentioned to me is that your grandparents obviously were pretty big Trump supporters. Could you tell us again what they said to you after Trump was elected?
So we both voted for the same candidate this year, and I told them that I kind of regret that. And the baby boomers and Gen Xers are probably the two biggest majorities that voted for Trump.
Yep.
They're very, very proud of him. They're very supportive of him. And one of the main things that my family has said, at least my grandparents and my great aunts and uncles that are in that baby boomer demographic, were like, "Oh, that's unpatriotic of you to regret who you voted for, being Trump. You know, like he's gonna do great things. He's gonna make America great again." And I'm sitting there, I'm like, how can you call me unpatriotic in knowing what I do for a living?
Yeah. And that's
That
something I've
to
gotten a
me
lot
just
too.
doesn't make much sense.
That's something I've gotten a lot too. And obviously we're just for clarity's sake, and that's all I'm going to say is that we're both in government work, of which we do
Yep,
not represent the opinion thereof, and we're going to keep it like that. One of the things that I've gotten a lot,
absolutely.
yeah, this is why I personally, like on a pure personal level, dislike Trump is because all the things he would say, that despite the fact that just our government work, I apparently did not love or support my country, um, really hurts and is deeply saddening.
Deemed an enemy of the state.
Exactly, exactly. One thing I want to ask real quick: the enemy of the state comment. Did you hear about that before I discussed it with you, or uh, was it only
I heard
after?
it as soon. I heard it before he won, and then shortly after he won.
But it was after you voted, right?
Yes.
Okay. I think it's funny is because I think you are one of the prime examples of why this election went the way it did. And I hate to call you a statistic, but you really are such a statistic because you only voted for the president, right?
Yep.
Yeah, is being exhausted, just wanting some type of change, and kind of believing some of the narrative that he put out at first really did. Would you say disillusioned you as to what was happening?
It most certainly disillusioned me because one of the main things that we brought up before in conversations was Trump proudly stating that he wanted to bring back. This is while he was in Detroit and called it a
Hmm.
shithole, which angers me tremendously because
Yeah,
it is a great city and anyone who's from there knows that it's getting better. He pointed out so many things that were already in works and happening. Like he was like, "I'm going to bring the motor industry back." GM and Ford have already been trying to do that. Ford already bought the central station and turned it into executive offices for their electric side of the plant. And GM is currently renovating their Renaissance Center that's been GM's headquarters in Detroit for years, been our tallest building in the city. I mean, he's sitting there just already regurgitating everything that's been happening.
yeah, that's been
And
a
so,
it's been a frustrating thing to see because he's been doing that for quite a while. He did that since 2016 and before. I've spoken a lot about because he did this with Obama's economy. The second he takes office, suddenly the economy is going to be great. The inflation will be
yeah,
down, even though he has
yeah,
done nothing for it. And I think,
nope.
yeah, that's
But
that's that's been the frustrating thing about all of this is just trying to like you ask anybody why they voted for him, and obviously you're an exception because you're very clear like of what happened. But you ask anybody else why they voted for him, and it's like they can't really explain anything, and
nope.
it's a problem we have with the media right now is the fact that the most prominent news sources is what TikTok and then influence podcasters. So
Influence podcasters, TikTok especially, because my generation has that big problem right now that I would really like to change, and that's why I want to keep doing these podcasts with you. Why I would like to be some sort of a co-host and be like a moderator on yours is to show my age demographic that 15 seconds of news is not news at all. It is a headline. You need
yeah,
to go do research after the fact.
I completely agree with you. And again, that's why I'm actually starting to do this. I think one of the biggest problems is that those who put out the information will not do any research themselves, and it's extremely frustrating to
No,
see. Like Joe Rogan is not a bad guy, right? I don't hate Joe
no,
Rogan.
he's actually a pretty good dude. I've been a fan of his podcast for years because he'd bring on so many interesting personalities. He'd do like interviews with actors, famous influencers, comedians, all these different types of people, and he'd be well versed. And I think he's a great dude just in facts of his morals. I mean, he did UFC commentary for free for the first like 5 years.
Yeah.
He did it out of the will of his heart.
I think the issue though that I have with him, because I don't hate him, but I do dislike him a bit, is because when he does put out information, when he does bring up some people, he is not educated, and he's admitted this himself. He is not well versed enough to
Yeah,
push back on some of these bad ideas, and he himself has been fell
no,
victim to it, even without another commentator. The most famous aspect of it, because one of Trump's defining cultural attacks was against trans people. And one of the things he talked
yep.
about, Joe Rogan specifically, was that the trans argument has gotten so extreme that now they're putting litter boxes in school bathrooms for furry kids.
So actually, my rival high school did end up doing that, ironically.
They put in a litter box. I'm sorry, what?
Yes, they did. Yep.
Explain this to
My
me.
rival high school in Ohio did put in the school voted on it, parents accepted it, and they have litter boxes in gender neutral bathrooms.
Hold up. All right, we're gonna do a bit of research on this. What high school would this have been? What county?
I think Rossford High School in Wood County.
Wood County, Ohio.
Yes, sir.
Okay, hold up. Public school, Rossford.
Yep.
All right, let me look this up. Rossford,
I may be wrong, but I remember hearing about this a while back.
okay, Ohio, litter boxes. All right, because I this might be a perfect example of misinformation maybe affecting you a bit too. Because the
Oh,
first thing I found,
personally, or
the first thing I found was from 13 Action News from Toledo, Ohio.
oh, 13 ABC. Yep.
Yep. Superintendent denies rumors of litter boxes in restrooms for students who identify as cats. So I think,
Oh, denies. Okay.
yeah, the rumor is
Okay.
that our school have litter boxes in the restrooms to accommodate individuals who are self-identifying as animals. This is simply and empathetically not true. So, I, hey buddy, I think you might have been persuaded by
Oh,
misinformation by Joe Rogan.
well, I didn't hear that from Joe Rogan. I heard it from a couple of my buddies that were still going to school. I heard that last year while I was doing my job in other places, and so I wasn't personally there to
No, I
see for
get you.
myself. But I remember hearing it from current students there.
Yeah, I see. It's from Carroll School District, Casey Brulai. So I think, well, it could have been your buddies may have also kind of been in that social media circle that involved that the same stories that Joe
Oh
Rogan
yeah,
was repeating.
absolutely. We
No,
were all misinformed.
yeah. Is currently hosting a toy drive. Yeah, that's the only thing I can find on it besides going straight to, yeah, I there's an annual report about shelving units from 2023, but I can't see anything about putting in litter boxes. So hey, here we go, live and in person. We're already fighting the misinformation campaign.
We're already fighting the fake news drive.
ah,
That's what I'm
gotta
here for.
gotta love it. But on that particular thing, on the misinformation in general. So you've spoken on you consider yourself from Detroit as well, correct?
Yes,
Yeah. So
absolutely. I graduated from Northwest Ohio in high school, but so being born and raised in Toledo, Ohio, a lot of my family's from Michigan. So like any extended holidays, weekends, breaks that we had during schooling, I'd be either in Detroit or northern Michigan doing lumberjack shenanigans or there's Red Wings Lions games.
Yeah. So one of the things that a lot of conservative media kind of pushes is that all, pretty much all cities and urban districts tend to lean more left for a lot of reasons.
Yeah.
But what they'll also say is that these cities are the centers of crime and corruption and everything wrong with America. Would you say that Detroit is the epitome of that, or would you say that it is in fact a growing, up and coming city again, and that the problems that it had before,
Oh,
like with the
I'm
economy
so
going down?
glad you are allowing me to get on the soapbox for this. I am one of Detroit's biggest advocates. I support that city. I will support that city in even into the afterlife. I spent so much time there. I mean, my grandparents had a house on Berkeley Drive that was a off road from Woodward Avenue that went straight into Detroit. I mean, I've seen the 8 Mile recreational home district that was famous for M&M. And Detroit's big issue for years was when they filed for bankruptcy. I mean, I can give you the whole history, but like everything started turning downhill from the race riots in the 60s. And the automotive plants saw that they wanted to move out. They came back in after everything was resolved. Then, when the 2008 economic recession hit, the housing market collapsed. And so people couldn't afford homes, meaning laborers couldn't stay in the city, meaning there wouldn't be enough jobs to fill those spots for the factories and the plants. So GM, Chrysler ended up selling to Fiat out here in Italy,
Oh, really?
and then oh yeah,
I didn't know that.
and then Ford ended up moving down to somewhere in the south. I know GM relocated to the south, and now they're all starting to come back now because they're all coming back to the roots because everyone's starting to attack the abandoned houses because that's where the hubs of crime are. That's where all the gangs and all the predators like to set up because
Yeah.
there's no one legally in that house. No one's going to check on it, and the police are outnumbered in Detroit.
Yeah.
So allowing all that crime to happen. But the support coming in right now is tremendous, and there's still a little bit of corruption with guys like Duggan and the former police chiefs of Detroit, just kind of turning a blind eye to everything, just get a little extra lining in their pockets.
Yeah. I,
But
I
in the
think,
last 4 to 5 years, Detroit has come back significantly.
and I think that's been a very good narrative that people have missed because I think you go to Fox News, like they switched from attacking just Detroit to going to places like Chicago, and that
Yep.
is the problems that affect these areas, the problems that affect the country as a whole, are complicated and multifaceted, and that Republicans have used to their advantage by simply painting everything as a easy, quick solution of just the Democrats or liberals' fault, and not
Yeah, no,
yeah,
they'll paint that immediately, and that's not the issue at all.
exactly. Which is why I've always loved our conversations because you do have an appreciation for the fact that the world is more complex than a 60-second TikTok video.
Yep, absolutely it is.
Now, all right, Colt. Well, I think that has been just about everything we decided we wanted to cover. So please go ahead and if you could give a message out to anybody listening, because obviously I'm not a very big podcaster yet. This is the first episode, really. What would you say
Right.
or urge people to do who may be more right of center? Because obviously I'm trying to appeal to a certain demographic. It is not going to be folks on the left. I'm trying to appeal like the more
Right. Yeah.
moderate,
No.
the center conservative who would be more inclined to think about these things. What
Right.
would you say to them?
Um, what I'd give on to the center conservatives, the center democratic individuals is one thing that I'll chalk up to one of my great podcast heroes, Charlie LaDuff, is do your own research. If you hear something and it sounds way out of left field, look it up because it probably is. The educated man is probably one of the strongest individuals that is on this earth. And the more educated you are, the more you can back yourself up and make a change. So
I
get out there,
could not agree.
research, and change it.
I could not agree more with you on that. The biggest issue I think we have right now is this masculine space of individuals who, for all intents and purposes, are not educated. The Logan
Right.
Pauls, the was it the Fine brothers is one of the other big ones. Um, they are putting out just crap, and we need to teach men in particular that education is a great thing. Education is one of the best things you could have for any type of empowerment, regardless of ethnicity, sex, orientation. That is what we should be focused on, because that is what a good man makes, in my opinion.
Absolutely.
Well,
It makes a gentleman.
it does, and we need more of those going around. By all means, chivalry should not be dead.
Absolutely.
Well, Cole, thank you very much for one of the inaugural chats of the Fireside Chats. You want to go ahead and say goodbye, Internet?
Well, thank you very much for having me. You have
Always.
a